Thank you very much, Manon De Feliz, who is also the executive director of the foundation. You've done a fantastic job. I want to join you in thanking Annie Dickerson and the Singer Foundation who made this possible. I want to join you in thanking Chris Bowie and Nazir Afzal and Rick Curtis and the John Jay College and everyone else who worked hard to make this second conference happen. I hope it's not the last one. And I hope that we really do address this issue. I'm going to spend the time that I have in addressing the question that all Americans ask me when they read about honor killings or watch it on television, and they ask me, what's honor? Why is a husband killing his wife because of honor? Why is a father killing his daughter? What's that? And the second thing I will do is I will give you some tips, and when I say you, I mean the professionals, the police, the law enforcement, other service providers, on how to recognize it and what to do about it. I have a feeling that you can't hear me at the back. You can hear me? No, yeah. Oh, yeah. Keep going? Oh, great, thanks. Yeah. So when I'm asked, what do they mean by honor? I tell them the story of my family, the country where I grew up in. When I was a little girl, my family made it clear to me that the relationship between men and women in our society was governed by a traditional code, and a very rigid traditional code of honor and shame. It is what girls do and what girls don't do that determines the honor of the family. In my case, if I obeyed my guardian, my father, my brother, if I took permission from them when I wanted to leave the house, and when going out, I was accompanied by a trusted adult. If I said yes to my father deciding when I should marry and who I should marry, all of that affirmed the honor of our family. If, on the other hand, I dressed in a certain way, for instance, if I didn't wear my headscarf or didn't cover my body, if I talked back to my parents, if I had a romantic relationship, all of these things compromised the honor of the family. And over time, as my family traveled, for instance, we went to Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, and we settled in Kenya for a period of 10 years, I found when I went to school that my Pakistani friends and my Yemeni friends adhered to a similar code of honor and shame, where what the girls, the females in the family did, somehow affected the honor of the men. And the behavior that I'm talking about had to do with anything that could be associated with the sexuality of the female, which is almost everything if you think about it. I was forced into marriage, and I found an opportunity to run away, and I went to the Netherlands. And for the first time, at that point I'm 22 years old, for the first time, I came into a society that didn't have that code of honor and shame. Dutch girls could do whatever they wanted without taking permission from their brothers or their fathers. If Dutch girls had boyfriends or dressed in ways that their parents didn't approve of, they were not physically punished. Parents would sometimes make comments about it. They would show their disapproval, but they would not kill them. They would not beat them up. On the other hand, while living in the Netherlands, I got acquainted with communities from Turkey, from Kurdistan, from Iraq, from Afghanistan. And every so often, there would be in the news a sensational case about an honor killing. And again, it was clear that they adhered to that code of honor and shame. For you as professionals, you want to know certain things that you can recognize when a young woman walks up to you and says, please help me, I'm in trouble, and I think I have probably compromised the honor of my family. One thing to look for is the controversy between the female and her family is about attire, the way she dresses or the way she refuses to dress. It's about curfew. She's to be home at a certain time, usually not after dark, and not alone. It's about romantic relationships. The pressure on her and the violence against her is communal. The whole family is involved, and it's not just the men against the women. It's the mothers, the sisters, the mothers-in-law. The females in the family, in fact, often take the lead. So do not make the mistake of thinking this is just, a male-dominated society, men oppressing women. It's a cultural mindset where everybody is trapped in. Sometimes, in honor violence, men are targeted, but the overwhelming majority are females. And here is what makes honor violence different from other forms of domestic violence. The perpetrator always justifies his action in the name of culture or religion. She violated God's law. It's my obligation to kill her. She brought shame upon our family. All my clan and all my tribe will look down upon me. I had no choice but to take her life. That's the kind of justification you hear. Then there are some punishment methods that may or may not be similar to the regular domestic violence that you're used to. Psychological pressure. The psychological pressure comes again from the whole family. And the pressure is often take forced marriages. If you accept this man as your husband, your father's health will improve. If you refuse to take him, your father will have a heart attack and you will die. Psychological pressure. If you go your way, you are selfish. What do you think of the rest of the family? What about your sisters? We'll never be able to give them an opportunity to marry, etc., etc. The violence sometimes occurs in families that have no history of violence. And there is a cause and effect to it. It starts with the girl behaves in a certain way and it's corrected. First, by warning her, by threatening her, and then there is some light beating, a slap. And that gets heavier and heavier, and sometimes women end up in the ER rooms, emergency rooms, or worse. Another feature, incarceration. Have you encountered cases where women, an adult woman, in her late teens, early 20s, early 30s, is locked up in the house, and the whole family knows that this is happening for weeks, sometimes for months? Change of scene. Some families, because every context is different and every family is different, some families know enough about the Western society that they live in to know that they will be in trouble with the law. And the way out is to lure the girl to the country of origin of the parents, and once she's there, they'll say, let's go on holiday or come and see your grandparents. Once she's there, her documents are taken away, and then different types of punishment are applied, or she's forced to marry. She's forced to do what the family wants her to do. Her freedom is taken away. If she is killed, we never find out. It's in very rare cases that we find out. Again, we see also forced marriage as a preventive measure. A family will see their teenage daughter suddenly putting on makeup and taking as friends Western or Westernized girls. And then the family gets together and says, well, before she becomes like so-and-so of that family, before she compromises our reputation, let's organize a wedding as fast as possible. And in the worst cases, when a girl refuses to adhere to the rules set out for her family, when she refuses to dress as they wish, when she refuses to break up with the boyfriend she's supposed to break up with, the family plot to kill her. And now, the killing. It is almost always made to look like it was spontaneous, but it is never spontaneous. The methods that are used range from stabbings and shootings. There's the case in Arizona where a father ran over his daughter, completely pre-planned. Sometimes they're drowned, as in the Canadian girls, the case of which was had last year. Strangling, and in rare cases, beheadings. If a murder is very sensational, like a beheading, it's not only directed at the victim whose life is taken, it's also a message to the girls in the community or in the rest of the family. You go your way, and this is what happens to you. So the more gruesome it is, the more chilling in its effects. You as professionals will, as you get to understand this concept of honor killing, find that it takes from the minute the girl violates the rule or the rumors are spread to the time that her life is taken. This is when you study the homicides, you'll find that it takes sometimes 2 years, sometimes 5 years. So there's a huge window of opportunity to save this woman's life, this girl's life. And who can help with that? Friends at school. Obviously, a girl who is cheerful and healthy will tell her friends that she's in trouble. Teachers and mentors can notice, and do notice, but often do not understand and just think of that family as another troubled family. Neighbors see and hear a lot. Colleagues at work, if the woman has a job. Then there are agencies, professional agencies that are qualified and are required to intervene and to help. Again, I go back to schools. Where there are teenagers involved, there's a great opportunity for the school to find things out, and without compromising the confidentiality of the girl, they can help by bringing in law enforcement. Doctors, pediatricians. I think Chris is going to talk about a case where a pediatrician reached out to us, and we were ultimately able, at least, to save her life. Emergency rooms in hospitals, and I know those of you here who deal with domestic violence on a regular basis know that when someone is brought in with broken ribs and almost dead, that she almost always says, "I fell down the stairs." In an honor killing or in an honor violence, it's when the parent or the husband or someone else is speaking for this individual and saying, "Oh, she had an accident, or she fell down the stairs," is making the excuse. The police, of course. Immigration authorities. Often, girls are forced into marriage to help another member of their family in the country of origin to come into the country. So immigration authorities will see applications for someone to stay in the country on the grounds of marriage. That should ring a bell. Child protection agencies, shelters for domestic violence. All of these agencies need to know and learn the ABC of why this specific type of violence is different from the domestic violence that is a part of this culture. Now, a few tips before I take questions and answers to service providers. And some of the tips may be controversial. Never try to mediate between the victim and her family. If the victim has found the courage to seek help, then she wants out. Mediation means you're putting her back in the cage she left. If her life is saved, she's going to compromise her freedom. She's going to marry and live with someone she doesn't want to live with. She's going to live by the rules of her family. If she leaves, she's taking a huge risk to be free, and that's why she's coming to you. So this whole mediation business, let's make peace between the family, compromises her freedom, and it doesn't always save her life. Never involve caseworkers and other professionals from the religious or ethnic community of the victim. In honor and shame societies, the interest of the family and the interest of the community is seen to be more important than that of the individual. And professional caseworkers really do adhere and apply to confidentiality rules, but all too often they talk about their work. And all too often they know the family of the girl, and the family of the girl know that this caseworker can help them find. And in the Netherlands, in the UK, there's so many cases where the girl's whereabouts are betrayed by professionals from her ethnic or religious community. Please take all appeals seriously, however incoherent, however inconsistent. Some girls will come in and will say, in their best English, my father wants to kill me. And very often, a lot of policemen say, what did you do? I was out last night. They shrug their shoulders and say, oh, I'd kill my daughter too if she were out that long. They don't understand that she really means it. Now, it is possible that some teenagers are melodramatic and they're seeking attention. But in any case, it's better to err on the side of caution. Seek safe houses and shelters for the victim in a state as far away from her home as possible. If you're a policeman in New York and a girl walks in and says, I need help, try and find and put her in a shelter in California or Texas or somewhere else, but not in the New York area because that is too easy to find. Get her started on counseling immediately. For some victims, it could take a very, very long time before they recover their self-confidence and their self-esteem. A lot of these girls will leave a household where they feel they're not free, and they end up in prostitution. They end up being taken advantage of. They end up committing suicide. And some of them, because of the hardship of loneliness, they end up calling home and saying, forgive me, I'm coming back, and then they get killed. If you're confronted with a teenager will need intensive parenting. The fact that she's dressed in Western clothes and that she's been wearing makeup doesn't make her fit to cope in a society where at the age of 18, all adults, girls and boys, are required to be self-reliant. In the household where she comes from, she was never prepared to cope in that way. So she will need to learn the ABC of that. And there are three things to pay attention to. It's money. Girls, and sometimes even guys, but girls from households like this haven't learned how to budget. They will work, and they'll work very hard, and they'll make money, but they'll spend it. They don't know how to save. I mean, all of that is something that parents normally do for their children, so there's a lot of parenting to be done. She may be in controversy with her own family and want her own sexual independence, but once she's out and alone, she really is vulnerable. Again, so many girls who flee this type of situation end up in human trafficking, end up being sexually exploited by predators outside of the home. So she needs to be prepared to know, to be able to tell a good guy from a bad guy. And obviously, violence. A lot of them, if they do grow up in a household where when you do something, you are punished through beatings or intimidations, a lot of the victims take that for granted and think, it's, you know, this person has helped me. If he hits me, it's okay for me to be hit. So parenting. With that, I hope I was able to clarify what honor violence is, what motivates it, where it comes from, and I have given you some tips. And now I'd like to use the rest of my time how long is that, to take questions from you. We need a mic, yeah. You'll keep the time. Okay, we have 15 minutes.
There we go. All right, I understand that the honor is very important, but what actual consequence do these families face from their community if that young girl is not killed or made to suffer in some way?
That's a very good question. So in conversations with men who were in the Netherlands, at least we were able to persuade them not to kill their daughters. They would say, please try and understand our side of the story. You're a man. Your daughter is seen partying and dating and dressing in a way that the community doesn't approve of. You're not welcome in the mosque. You're not invited to weddings. Your stature as a leader of the community sinks. People start approaching you and telling you, why are you letting this happen? She's a bad example for my daughter, etc., etc. We don't, the family, especially the males, are isolated. And the only way that they can get back into the good books of the community is by doing something about what is causing the problem. And so that is when, I mean, these families, these men, mostly the ones I have seen are law-abiding, hard-working. They've brought their families from their countries of origin to give them a better life here. It's just that somehow along the way, they didn't understand that a better life here might mean that their daughters might adopt a different lifestyle. So there's a lot of education to be done.
What is the source of that ideology? Where did it originate? Where did it come from? What caused it to exist?
Rick Curtis is the anthropologist, and I'm sure he can tell us, you know, the origins of these things. But one thing I can say is the need for men to control, or for families to control, patriarchal families to control the sexuality of women is universal. In Western societies, people, you know, when honor killings and other controlling measures come up, they point to 200 or 300 years ago, and in some countries maybe 50 years ago. So it is a universal thing. Some people justify it in the name of religion. A lot of the perpetrators within the Muslim community say, it's because of my religion that I'm doing this. Where does it come from? I mean, it's academic, and we can talk about it, you can write books about it, and I think it's a fascinating subject. But the main thing now is to acknowledge that it's there, and for us to realize that we are responsible and we can save lives.
Hi, so this is the, I think, big obvious question, but what is the solution?
Well, the founding of the AHA Foundation is part of the solution. As far as we are concerned, the solution is to create awareness that there is this type of specific domestic violence. Once everyone is informed, once you know that your neighbor, your friend, your client or your patient her life is threatened, then you are going to do something about it. On the long term, I think that the communities themselves need education and educational programs, and need to understand that by giving girls and women more freedom, that their honor is not compromised. On the contrary, I think that's a great honor. And that ultimately, it's a shift in mindset. And this is something that's going to take a very, very long time. But meanwhile, we need to try and save as many lives as possible by informing the right people, investigating the cases. You know, we don't know the scale and the scope of this. We know that it takes place, but we know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. And we know that we can organize intervention. When we try, we can save lives.
One thing that you mentioned was the young girls get tricked into going into holiday. What are some of the resources for those young girls that get tricked, and what can we do to help them?
Well, Manon mentioned that we were setting up a hotline. If we do succeed in creating this hotline, I know that in Britain and in Denmark, there is this possibility. If you call this line, then the right agencies get into action and make an attempt, if you're taken out of the country, to save you and bring you back. And if you call the hotline, even better, before you leave the country, then you can, I mean, it's even much better, so then the girls can be saved. But it's very, what I would like to do is to put up educational material in schools, not only for, say, the Westerners who need to learn about this culture, but also for the girls in that culture, that there are a number of steps that they can take to seek help, and a number of ways of telling their story. Very often they don't know how to tell their story, and so they hit a wall of misunderstandings.
Just to, based upon your point about the girls getting tricked overseas and so forth, and they're on holiday, I work at the U.S. Department of State, and basically, when a U.S. citizen's overseas, they can access the embassy. And we have consular staff as well. We also have services in place where we have repatriation loans we can offer individuals so they can get back to the United States. We coordinate with the Department of Health and Human Services, with International Social Services to provide resettlement services for once they enter the U.S. And that's where we work with NGOs as well to really provide different services that the State Department can't offer once they return. They also are able to, our embassy staff will actually help an individual and house them like in a domestic violence shelter in like a foreign country or a home of someone until we can get them out of the country.
Hi, good morning. I have a question. What if there are minors seeking, assistance? I mean, how does that process work if they were over a different country and, if it was a 13, 12-year-old asking for assistance?
Yeah.
So when it comes to minors, especially in a foreign country, basically we look at them as being abused or neglected in those types of circumstances. So therefore, we will try to coordinate with, again, the services back in the U.S. to be able to allow them to enter the U.S. and then be in foster care or child protective services once they enter back into the country. But there's ways the embassy can work around different things, especially involving a minor. And we actually have a foreign affairs manual, you'll find it on the website, that actually goes into how we can protect minors overseas.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the sensitivity of using one's own culture and religion as a support network, because I understand trying to distance people from that. However, I also know of cases where there were people that were used within their community and support network to help them intervene and escape.
Yeah. Cultural sensitivity plays out in many different ways. In honor and shame cultures, when something is perceived to be negative, then it's rejected. So for instance, you as an outsider will say, in Turkish culture, girls run the risk of this and that. People from the Turkish community will be upset and they'll say, no, it doesn't happen in Turkey, it's not ours. The perpetrators will say, I'm doing this because it says in the Quran, or I need to, whatever, kill her because she committed adultery, etc. And the Muslim community will say, no, 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 it doesn't happen in our community. It's not Islamic, it predates Islam, etc., etc. And what do you find when you talk about these things to members of the community? People are constantly changing the subject. We start by talking about the victim that's made the news and how to prevent other victims, other people from becoming victims. And we end up in elaborate discussions about culture, and religion. And I think we need to avoid that. That's one part. The other part is, okay, there are people within those cultures who do acknowledge that there is a problem and who are out there and who help the girls out, but they're poorly organized. They run the risk themselves of being accused of facilitating behavior that is frowned upon in the community. So it does work both ways, and you will see some of the professionals will say, I'm going to help you, but don't tell anyone. And so, you know, human beings and compassion for one another sometimes trumps culture and religion. Let me just put it that way. But I think the main thing for the broader culture, you know, the white American culture, the westernized culture, is to acknowledge that these things happen and that it's better to run the risk of offending people and save a life than to say, okay, I'm not going to offend anyone and this is not my business. Let's not turn the other way.
Thank you. Hi. I have a question. Well, I just wanted a little bit of clarity with regards to when you talk about these cultures, because you know, from my understanding of the whole presentation, you addressed a little bit of the difference between the DV and the honor killings with regards to psychological differences and, you know, the ways in which if someone was a DV victim will identify, you know, meaning I fell on the floor or I fell from the stairs, and someone else who, the parents who which, you know, is the mom or the dad or someone within the community identifying. Could you specify exactly when you say honor killings or honor violence culture, what culture are you necessarily, like what is the culture or what are these cultures? And are you, because from my understanding of the presentation, there is a whole lot of separation from the Western culture and these honor killings culture where, you know, you made identification of was example of the budget, which I think someone can also make the argument that there are a lot of Western young girls who don't know anything about budgeting at the age of 18, even sometimes up to 25. So could you further explain how you're categorizing these cultures and these Western and separating the two?
We had a client or someone approach us from the country of Saudi Arabia. According to her culture, and it's not just in practice, but by law and by religion, her position is determined, and she can behave in a certain way. And if she violates those rules, and I talked about them, the way she dresses, romantic behavior, this girl even converted to Christianity, and so on, that activates the rest of the family to say, this is unacceptable behavior, and here are ways of punishing it. Now, if you take the world map and you say, let's chronicle the ethnicities or the communities of the countries where the likelihood that a woman is going to be punished because she violates the honor of the family, or where the honor-shame dichotomy determines the relationship between men and women, then I can say to you, I come from Somalia, that's the case. We lived in Saudi Arabia. It's in Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Sudan, and as you go down the list, I think you will also find people from India, Hindus, and people from Albania. But the overwhelming majority of countries and communities are Muslim. And even though a lot of Muslims will say it's not in the Quran or it's not in the Hadith, it's very strange that people are organized in denying it, the people who don't want it, but somehow they fail to organize in eliminating and eradicating this terrible practice and practices.
Hi.
Hi.
A good number of us are representing the police department for the city of New York, and we work in the Special Victims Unit. My question to you is, in our work, we investigate sexual assaults, rapes, and that sort of stuff.
Incest, yeah.
Is there a link between these victims and these cultures that are sexually assaulted as a form of violence towards them, but are ashamed to even begin to explain that that's the cause.
Yes, that is the greatest tragedy of all. Because of this rigid code about the sexuality of females, if you lose your virginity, you have shamed the family. But what if your father rapes you, or if your uncle rapes you, or if your brother rapes you? You've lost your virginity, so you've shamed the family. And in these cases, some of the victims that I think, because we really haven't completed investigating, but I think most of the cases have to do with some form of sexual abuse at home by a relative. And when that gets out of hand, then the girl is, she's a victim twice. She's victimized, and then it's her fault. And so she needs to be killed. We need to get rid of her to regain the honor. And you can imagine that the perpetrator obviously has an interest in silencing her.